I'm going to do section 13.1 here, talking about different types of behavior that are found in animals. So I'm only going to cover the first two sections of this chapter this week. We are not going to cover section 3, which deals with animal reproduction and development, just because... Lucas, it's okay. Just because we've been talking a lot about animal reproduction and plant reproduction, so this is it for life science. So types of behavior. First off, what is behavior? So behavior is when an organism reacts to other organisms, or to its environment. And so behavior kind of helps them achieve getting materials that they need in order to stay alive or to maintain homeostasis. And so homeostasis is steady internal environmental conditions, kind of like your body temperature, how that remains constant, blood sugar levels, the behaviors that can be carried out as individuals or as groups. And so this section deals mostly with individual behavior, and section 2 deals with group behavior. So when you respond to your environment, you're reacting to a stimuli, and stimuli can be external, like temperature, weather, environment, things that happen outside your body, or they can be internal, things that happen within your body, hunger, thirst, illness, fever, vomiting, etc. Stress, when animals feel threatened, they will either do one of two things. They will run away or they will attack. This is called your fight or flight response. Just recently, they've actually added a third F, fight, flight, or freeze response. So you'll fight your way through the problem or the threat, you'll run away from the problem or threat, or you freeze, you don't do anything, you're actually like paralyzed. You have no idea, like you can't move. Okay, moving on to behaviors. So innate behavior is behavior that's inherited rather than learned. I'm going to talk about reflexes and instincts. So reflexes is an innate behavior. It's an automatic response. It never reaches your brain. So like when you touch a hot stove, okay, so you have receptors in your fingertips that sense that it's hot, like, whoa, this is really, really hot. And it sends a nerve impulse down your arm to your spinal cord, and then it loops around. So it goes to the spinal cord and it automatically loops around and heads right back down to your hand, and your hand moves away from the heat source. So reflexes mean that the message never actually goes to the brain because it's cut in time to potentially save your life. Armadillos, when they're startled, they jump. It's one of their reflexes. You have knee-jerk reflexes. Babies have reflexes. Like if you rub their cheek, then they open their mouths because that's the reflex for them to, to feed. Instincts are not reflexes. Instead, they are very complex. So, like, how does a spider learn how to spin a web? How does a snake know that it can unhinge its jaw and eat an egg? So, lots of instincts. Behavior patterns, which means that their behavior corresponds to seasons. One of them is called migration. So seasonal movement from one area to another, we see this in our area, especially with birds, how they will migrate to find food or water or return to breeding locations. Monarch butterflies do the same thing. During, like right before fall, they will migrate to Mexico and then they'll come back. Another type of seasonal behavior is hibernation. When temperatures drop or when the conditions get colder, an animal, what they'll do is they'll feed up, they'll store up on a lot of food, eat a lot of food, gain a lot of fat, and then they will decrease their body temperature, activity, heart rate, breathing rates, and live off of their fat reserves. Reptiles do the same thing, but we don't call it hibernation. We call it estivation, where it's like a hibernation-like state, where they decrease their activity, but we don't call it hibernation. Okay, do not do those questions. Moving on to learned behaviors, where animals pick up behaviors through either experience or practice. So the first one's called imprinted, which means that an animal becomes attached to an organism or maybe a place within a certain time frame after its birth or hatched from an egg. So there was this guy, I think his name was Korenz. or Lorenz, a German animal behaviorologist, he would imprint ducks onto him. And so these ducks thought that he was mom, and they would follow him around everywhere. You can see that this dog on the right-hand side has imprinted these ducks or birds onto him as a parent or guardian. So I have a quick story. In college, I had a baby mallard named Ferdinand, and for this lab experiment, I had to imprint my duck, Ferdinand, onto my amazing Allen Iverson shoes. And what I did is I took Ferdinand out of an isolated box, so he never saw another duck. The only thing he saw was my shoes. And I'd place him in a pen with my shoes, and then I'd walk around and say quack, 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 quack. And Ferdinand would think that these shoes were him, or not him, but the same species. See, like, Ferdinand didn't have a mirror. He didn't know what he looked like. So he saw these shoes, and these shoes supposedly quacked, and he thought that I was its mom. So I did this for several weeks. And then at the end of these several weeks, I exposed Ferdinand to other objects to observe his behavior. So first I took Ferdinand, put him in the pen, and I took a tennis ball on a string and I said quack. And he freaked out and ran away. So even though the tennis ball said quack, he's like, you're not Allen Iverson shoes. Then I exposed Ferdinand to a model duck on wheels and said quack. And he freaked out and ran away because they weren't Allen Iverson shoes. And finally, I took a mallard duck that was very social, that was hanging out with other mallard ducks. It's the same age, and put it in the pen. And when this duck saw Ferdinand, he's like, hey, another duck, a friend, yeah, come here. And he ran towards Ferdinand, and Ferdinand ran away. And he freaked out because he was like, who the heck are you? So I felt horrible doing this lab because I had imprinted Ferdinand onto my shoes, and he's not a pair of shoes. So at the end of the experiment, we all sent our ducks to a duck farm so they could relearn how to be ducks and gain their social skills. And then after a few weeks, we went to the farm to try to find our ducks. And I was kind of heartbroken because Ferdinand no longer responded to my shoes. But at the same time, I was happy because he was a duck. So trial and error is another example of learned behavior. So organisms will try several ways to complete a task. And then once they learn how to do the task, then they become faster and faster at it. So babies with like toys with shapes, you know, they try to put the block in the correct shape holder, and at first they struggle with it, but then over time they get faster and faster and faster. So at college, I was considered a rat whisperer. So I had a friend that was in the neuroscience program, and they did a lot of experiments on rats. And these rats would try to bite the students. So I would come in and I would try to like calm the rat and be friendly and give them social skills because these neuroscience students didn't really play with them that much. But in my spare time, when I was with the rats, I would train them to go through obstacle courses. You know, train to go through monkey bars, tunnels, steps, rope bridges. And when they completed each of these tasks, I would reward these rats with peanut butter. And then over time, I'd actually take all of these individual tasks and I put them all together to make this mega maze. And at the end, I got a lot of peanut butter. So I had taught these rats to go through each of these individually, but then when I placed it all together, they knew exactly what to do, and they got rewarded with peanut butter. Conditioning is another learned behavior where for one stimulus, they pair one stimulus with another stimulus. So what I mean by that is, here's a blue jay, and blue jays eat butterflies. Now, if a blue jay eats a monarch butterfly, which is orange in color, monarch butterflies are toxic, and it will cause the blue jay to throw up. So the blue jay will learn, okay, orange butterflies make me sick. So the stimulus is an orange butterfly, the response is vomit. This blue jay will associate vomit with an orange butterfly. So Pavlov was a scientist who trained his dog to salivate at the ringing of a bell. So what he did is he took a bell and he would ring it, and the dog was like, what the heck are you doing? There's no response. But then if he gave the dog food, he noticed that the dog would salivate. So he's like, okay, I'm going to take these two stimulus and put them together. So he rang the bell and gave the dog food, and the dog would salivate. And pretty soon, after many, many times of this, when Pavlov would just ring the bell, the dog would salivate, even though there was no food present. So it's kind of cool. All right, another story. So I had a cat named Lynx, and I trained my cat how to sit. So what I did is I'd put a treat in my hand, and I'd make a fist, and I'd say sit. And at first my cat didn't do anything. But then I would like push its butt down, and then when its butt touched the ground, I gave it a treat. And pretty soon it started to associate the fist with sit, and he'd get a treat. Now Lynx isn't with me anymore. He was actually picked off by a bald eagle. Okay, hold on. I'm getting a phone call. Brittany Erickson. Good. I'm in the middle of a recording, so is this like... Yep. If she could take it? Does she... Do I have it, or does she know where it's at? Okay, I have keys. I can be out there in like 10 minutes. Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. Okay, bye. Okay, sorry about that. All right, cognitive behavior. So cognitive behavior is thinking, reasoning, and solving problems. So they're kind of using their brains to solve problems. So ravens are actually very, very, very smart. You can train ravens to do a lot of crazy things. They can problem solve. You know, they can pull on string to get meat that's been suspended from a stick. They can build contraptions to get that as well. Sea otters, they use rocks to break open clams, so they're kind of using tools. Chimps do the same thing. So those are all examples of cognitive behavior. So that does it for 13.1. The next time you have a lecture, we're going to talk about group behaviors, so how animals communicate and interact in societies.